Welcome back to the final hour of the Gary Sutton Show. Don't forget, I'm going to be here today. I will not be here the rest of the week. I'm going to be on vacation, actually coaching my basketball team in Washington, D.C., and looking forward to that. I'll be back with you next Monday morning. Chris Plant will be in for me the next 4 days, and I hope you enjoy him. But again, I'll be off the next 4 days, so looking forward to it. But always miss you. I love getting back next Monday morning, and we'll do all the same things we do here on the Gary Sutton Show. We'll keep our eyes on the events as they happen throughout the week. 1-800-357-0910 is our number here on the show throughout the show. And don't forget to read my blog today, Just a Voice on Main Street, at newsradio910.com. Just go up to the top. It says Gary's blog. My blog's called Just a Voice on Main Street. And it's entitled A Crisis of Confidence, after the words of Jimmy Carter back in 1979. Are we having that today? That'll be also our talk topic later on, 11:35 this morning here on the Gary Sutton Show. But first up, good friend and a guy I have respect for as one of the leading voices on immigration in this country. Michael Cutler is a senior special agent of the INS. He's retired now. He's there for over 30 years. Senior fellow with Californians for Population Stabilization, and a voice that's heard out there on TV and around the country all the time. And we welcome Michael back to the show this morning here on the Gary Sutton Show. Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm great, Gary. How are you? Well, I know how you're doing. This is Getaway Monday for you.
Well, kind of.
A wonderful, deserved vacation.
Kind of, but there's so much going on. You kind of feel like if you get away from any of the things out there where you get all your information anymore, you're away for 10 minutes, you're behind 2 days, so it's kind of one of those kind of deals. But I'll have to keep caught up all week long, and I'll be down inside the evil empire in D.C. all week, so you can hardly stay away from any of it down there. But anyway, great to have you on this morning. We're watching what's going on at the border. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with you. Nothing of note has happened since then, except more and more people are coming in. Where are we going?
Well, we're going in the wrong direction on a one-way street at increasing speed. You mentioned CAPS, Californians for Population Stabilization. Right. Their great website, by the way, folks, is CAPSWeb, C-A-P-S, CAPSWeb.org. And my own website, by the way, Michael Cutler, one word, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net. I wrote an article for CAPS that they posted last week, and it was entitled Immigration Meltdown, The Far-Ranging Consequences for America.
And I read the piece, by the way, it's sitting here in front of me, and it's a great piece. I want to use that as kind of our basis this morning.
Good. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like it. And, here's the point that I'm making. Everyone is focused on the border, and I understand that. Although we are, as I always like to remind people, a country of 50 border states. Any state with an international airport, any state that has access to the tens of thousands of miles of meandering U.S. coastline or lies along our northern and or southern borders or border states. So that's every state. But if you look at what's happening because of what's happening right now along that southwest border that's supposed to separate the United States from Mexico, immigration is a system. And my own background, I was going to be an engineer originally. To me, the astronauts were the heroes of choice, not athletes. I have letters from Shepard and Grissom. They're very valuable to me, and I'm sure to other people. But, I love watching the programs about how they do the forensics investigation into a plane crash. And almost always when a plane crashes, when it's a mechanical failure, it's that 25-cent bolt that comes apart. It's always something relatively small that results in a flaming crash. And immigration is no less a system. Every component of the system is interconnected. If you screw up one component, it has ramifications for the entire system. Right now, ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, are being taken off their assignments around the country to work on the border situation. Immigration judges are being ordered to close their courtrooms around the country and head for the border to become involved with the hearings of these illegal aliens coming across the southern border. People who were in front of those judges having their deportation cases heard, those cases have ended. These people are getting a stay, a reprieve. It may give them years of ability to remain in the United States even though they're here illegally. They may well have criminal histories. This could then endanger the safety and well-being of people in the communities where these people live. And by the way, most often the people greatest at risk of the violence of transnational criminals are the members of the ethnic immigrant communities, not just from Latin America, the Russian community, the Asian community, the African community, the Caribbean, the European communities. So this has such wide-ranging impact And most people don't see that. All they're seeing is the headline of the border, the people coming across the border. So understand something, folks. This is impacting your life wherever you are, because the immigration laws are our first and last line of defense against international terrorists, transnational criminals, and people whose presence is harmful to us. So this really is a very serious problem for all of us.
Michael, I thought you opened up your piece by describing this as a human tsunami, and I think you said that on our program some weeks ago.
Yes, I did.
And as we well know, tsunamis overwhelm any kind of system that you've had. We've seen the real tsunamis around the world, but this is overwhelming systems. I was reading this morning that Texas is being overwhelmed right now by 911 calls from lost migrants, people who are coming who are lost. I mean, it's amazing to see all the different things here happening. You got Rick Perry ready to deploy National Guard to a portion of the border. You're finding out from a former patrol chief that 1 in 5 illegals has a criminal record. Of course, Harry Reid told us last week that the border is secure. So, I mean, I don't know why we're really worried about that, but Harry Reid said it's secure, right?
Well, Harry Reid said the border is secure, and then said if we pass comprehensive reform, we would have no problem.
Right.
Well, if the border is secure, then what problem is he talking about, number one? I mean, the lies are very transparent, but they don't care. This is almost what we saw during the Second World War, the German concept of just keep lying. If you tell a lie often enough, people will begin to think it's the truth. So Harry Reid is saying, well, if we had comprehensive reform. Here's my question. Does anybody out there in radio land, anybody who's hearing my voice, think of any other area of a failure of law enforcement, whether it's drunk driving, whether it's drugs, whether it's tax fraud, whatever it is? Is there any other area of law enforcement where the politicians, our supposed leaders, tell us that the solution is to provide those people who commit a crime with what it was that they wanted to get illegally in the first place as a way of solving the problem?
I've asked that question, not quite as eloquently as you did there, but I've asked that question. I mean, why do we treat illegal immigration in a way that is unique from the rest of our thinking about every other thing in the country? We don't say, oh, you tried to rob the bank and we caught you, but geez, let us go over here. Now we can do it in a more civilized way, and we'll give you the money. We'll open the doors instead of you opening the doors, and we'll give you the money, and things are all right.
Well, let's put it in another way, which I think you may like. Why is it that if you make an undocumented withdrawal from a bank, you go to jail, but if you make an undocumented entry, we'll give you the key to the kingdom? How does that work for you, Gary?
Well, yeah, it's kind of the same way I think about the tax system sometimes. If I take from one person to give to you,
I'll tell you
I get
why
arrested.
This is happening.
Yeah.
You want me to tell you the bottom line that no one has the guts to say? This is exactly what the politicians, for the most part, on both sides of the aisle want. Republicans and Democrats alike. In fact, most Republicans, and I just spoke with my good friend Lou Barletta over the weekend. I got to tell you, there's a Yiddish term we use, it's mensch, which means a really decent, honorable, honest person, and that's Lou.
Yeah.
I tried reaching him last week, and he couldn't get back to me. He called me Saturday morning apologizing that he didn't get to speak to me sooner. There's going to be a hearing held, by the way. I think it's on the 25th, 26th. I got to check the calendar. On the 9/11 Commission findings and where we are now with immigration. This is something I've been yelling about for the longest time. So we were conferring about that hearing and other matters of interest. So Lou is absolutely on our page. He's absolutely having a meltdown over this. I can tell you folks with confidence where Lou stands.
And people got a chance to hear him on our show. People got a chance to hear him on our show last Monday. He was on with us for a half hour and just and laid out exactly what you're talking about.
Right. So he's really a guy who understands who he was elected to represent. But if you look at most of the Republicans as a party, and that's why I hate both parties, because they're looking out for the people with the money who promised them votes and contributions, and it's hard to represent constituents in that environment. But Lou understands why he's there, as he always likes to tell me. He knows who sent him to Washington and with what purpose, to paraphrase Mark Twain. But the Republicans are winning like crazy on this deal. Because, you see, they also want this massive influx of aliens, because this is what the Chamber of Commerce wants. It's what the banks want. It's what corporations want. It's what the special interest groups want. So they're saying, wow, how cool is this? We get this massive influx that the people that give us campaign funding want, and we get to scream at the president. We get our photo opportunity. We get to get in front of the cameras. We can beat up on the Democrats and say all the things that we want to say that plays well, but at the end of the day, the aliens are getting in, and the people that are cutting me my checks for my political campaigns, they're getting what they want. This is a win-win-win for them. It's a lose-lose-lose for we the people and for America.
Yeah. And see, that's let me just jump in there real quick, Mike, because that's the problem today, that we have this Republicans win, Democrats lose, Democrats win, Republicans lose. But in the process, we almost always lose as the people for whom you are supposed to be making the policy and in whose name you're supposed to be making the policy. And that's, I think, what troubles a lot of the country right now, this win-lose mentality instead of win for the country at the end, no matter what happens to your particular side.
Well, that's right. And if you look at the UN website, one of the things they say is that if you want to increase the remittance flow, the money flowing out of the United States to the third world, the fastest way to increase the money, and last year it was between 125 and 200 billion with a B. And when you look at the multiplier effect, and the idea behind the multiplier effect, and I'm not an economist, I don't even play one on TV, but the multiplier effect says that if you make $1 and you go out and spend that $1, the guy who gets the money from you makes a purchase later that week, and the money he gives the $1 to gets that guy to make a purchase at some point. You buy a pair of shoes, and the shoe salesman buys some lumber so he can work on the deck, and he hires a construction worker. So everyone makes out on that $1. They call that the multiplier effect, and it used to be a 5-to-1 ratio. Now they say it's 3-to-1. Every $1 that floats in the economy generates $3 of business. Well, what's 3 times $125 billion? We're getting awfully close to $500 billion. Then if it's $200 billion, we're over $500 billion. So let's use that as the rough figure. $500 billion deficit increase because of the money that is flowing out of our economy. Because when you send that money out of the economy, it's lost to the economy.
Yeah, it's not working in the economy, right?
It doesn't help anything, right? And the whole idea to the economic stimulus package was pump money into the economy. It generates business. This sucks money out of the economy, okay? Now, that's before you look at wage suppression. That's before you look at Americans who flat out lose their jobs and go from middle-class, tax-paying consumers to people living on various safety net programs who live in poverty and lose their disposable income. I would argue that if we took care just of immigration and all of the ripples that it has in our country, you could shrink America's national debt every single year. Shrink it. But we're not doing that. So when Harry Reid can stand up and say this is good for the economy, or any politician can say it, they need to be voted out of office. They are flat-out, bald-faced liars, and they need to be called out for it. It makes no sense. And in fact, if you look at where wages are going, the new war cry is wage equality. I was watching this program on TV last week tonight, and this guy, John Oliver, spent half of his program talking about wage inequality. And I'll tell you what, I'm a Democrat, you know that.
Right.
I agree with raising the minimum wage. I know my conservative friends may disagree with me, but I'm a great believer that if you go to work, you should have enough money at the end of the week to at least put the lights on in your house and maybe buy a hamburger somewhere. So if we had a $15 an hour minimum wage, we still don't live well on that. But meanwhile, when we hear wage inequality, it conjures up the image of these CEOs that make 500 times what their employees make, which is crazy.
Well, it also rolls in the other direction, that if we had a lot of these things that weren't being suppressed, if we had immigration under control, would there be a need to even talk about the minimum wage? Because everybody pretty much would be doing the right things or have more disposable income to do the right thing. Got to take a quick break, Mike. We're going to come right back. We'll both get a breath, and I'm looking forward to getting Michael Cutler right back here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. The president just made remarks a few moments ago about the situation with the Malaysian plane that was down near the Ukraine, and that there are 12,000 Russian troops gathered on the border. Not a whole lot new that we can see so far. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. With us this morning is Michael Cutler, who's a senior special agent, 30 years as an INS agent, retired now, senior fellow with California for Population Stabilization. Michael, there's new data out. We get another one of those document dumps on Friday. You probably saw it. There was data on Friday afternoon about the family units who are illegally crossing the Texas border. And the data, which was dumped by the U.S. Border Patrol late Friday afternoon, shows that the inflow of youths and children traveling without parents has doubled since 2013 to 57,525 in the 9 months up to this month here, July of 2014. But the number of migrants who cross the border in so-called family unions has spiked fivefold to 55,420, according to the Border Patrol's data, which came out and amid a storm of news, obviously, about the shoot down of the Malaysian aircraft in Ukraine and delays in failed U.S. nuke talks with Iran and on Hamas' continued war against Israel. And so, the problem is that when there's so much out there every day, that some pretty important stuff that by itself is important gets lost amid all these news stories coming out, right?
Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm standing under Niagara Falls with an 8-ounce water glass trying to catch all the water. But you're right, and the impact is huge. And, these are people that are turning themselves in. Now, what concerns me also is while the Border Patrol is busy dealing with the people that are turning themselves in, who is able to evade detection?
Yeah.
I'm very concerned. If you look at the situation with Iran, if you look at this business about the sanctions, they're trying to get a nuclear weapon. We know that they are flying Quds troops into Venezuela on a weekly basis. The Quds, by the way, folks, are the shock troops. They're elite, the ones who do sabotage. If you remember, just before the election, there was an attempt to kill the Saudi ambassador, perhaps blow up the Saudi and Israeli embassies in Washington. It was members of the Quds that were going to pull that off. We have Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah training camps in the tri-border region of Brazil. We also just had a case of a Tunisian terror suspect pleading guilty to visa fraud. He was the guy that was going to supposedly blow up the train between the United States and Canada.
Right.
So it's, again, going back to my point that it's not just the Mexican border. In fact, that was the point I made in an article that I wrote for Front Page Magazine, David Horowitz Freedom Center magazine. I've become a columnist for them as well. And I called it Border Security and the Immigration Colander. The idea that we're being told, well, if we just secure the Mexican border, the sun will shine and, forgive me, but the men won't need Viagra and all will be well with the world. In reality, this is like a colander with so many holes in it. They're telling you that if we halfway plug one hole, now you can use that colander as a bucket to carry water. We're being inundated. And the threat is to the existence of America as we know it, because we're talking about terrorism. We're talking about narcotics and the crime that it brings with it. The New York City Police Department has issued their police officers the antidote to heroin overdoses, and it's not just them. Police departments across the country are doing it because we're being flooded with heroin. Well, heroin is only smuggled into the United States. We don't produce a single gram of that stuff inside the United States. These are all the ripples and ramifications and repercussions from what is happening on that southwest border. It is rippling from coast to coast, border to border, and it's impacting every single community in America today. And yet you have clowns like Harry Reid and others saying, well, the solution is to give people who are here illegally lawful status. Let me ask you, and I may have used this analogy before.
Just about 30 seconds left. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Who would pay for a toll road if there was a lane that said no speed limit free?
Great question. And
if they tell us that we have a 6.1% unemployment rate while ignoring 100 million unemployed Americans, that's like the doctor coming out of the OR after a patient dies and having the nerve to tell the family, well, at least he doesn't have fever. We have a real problem trusting our government. You spoke about trust in that commercial, and that trust has been violated so often. Election day is coming. The politicians need to hear from us, folks. I always like to make the point that my commentaries, democracy is not a spectator sport, but you can read more about what I've been writing at capsweb.org,
right.
michaelcutler.net, and you have a terrific vacation, my friend. You earned it.
Well, and thanks so much, Michael. We look forward to our next time very soon. Again, the name of the article, Immigration Meltdown, the Far-Reaching Consequences for America, and it's at capsweb.org. Michael, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Be well. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you. Michael Cutler, former INS agent for 30 years. Boy, We're going to put that up on the website, by the way. That'll be up tomorrow at facebook.com/910WSBA. We have a few up from Friday also. If you listen to the show on Friday, you missed it. We put our clips up there. Also, don't forget to read my blog, Just a Voice on Main Street. Go to newsradio910.com, and at the very top it says Gary's blog. Just hit it. And we're going to talk about that blog when we come back here on the Gary Sutton Show. Do we have a crisis of confidence here in our country right now? Tell me. We'll be right back on WSBA. It's 31 minutes past the hour.